So we're joined all the way from Wallace, Louisiana, by my friend Joe Banner, co-founder of the Descendants Project there at the Woodland Plantation in Louisiana. We thank you so much for taking some time for us today. I got a room full here with me at Velma Jackson High School. This is our entrepreneurship class, and we got a couple other teachers watching with us in other areas of the school. My friend Adrian King in U.S. history and Miss Monica Williams in journalism, both watching in their classrooms right now as well. And we're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County schools, Madison Central, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. So thank you again for taking some time out of your busy schedule to speak with us about the amazing work you're doing down there in Louisiana.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and hello to all of you that I can't see off screen. Thank y'all for joining.
Yeah, and now obviously we want to talk about all the great projects you guys are behind, all the ways that your entrepreneurial spirit has really made a difference in the community. But just give us a little background because me and you share something in common that we both have degrees from Louisiana State University. So you went to LSU, you continued your education, got a advanced degree, and you've had your hand in a lot of things, business and education.
Yeah, I am a Tiger. Our Tigers are suffering on the football field, but that's okay. We'll get a good coach in there soon. But yeah, went to LSU, my undergrad, mass comm, and so always had an affinity for communication. I grew up, well, my grandparents were my babysitters. They babysat all of the siblings as my parents went to work. So we had a lot of time with them, and they were wonderful storytellers. So I think being exposed around them, hearing the stories about our community and the history, about our area, also our roots really inspired me to, I think, towards the communications field, but it also gave me a deep love for history. So I never imagined that I've been able to combine them all this way, including the entrepreneurship angle of it all. But yeah, well, here I am.
Yeah, and you spent some time you at the director of communications for the Whitney Plantation, which is right down the road there from you in Louisiana, and it's just so interesting because to talk about a little history, 1811, where you guys are, the largest slave revolt in United States history. So, and I know it did not have a great ending for the slaves, but there's still so much that comes from that, and so much we can learn. So just tell us how that part of your history, because a lot of the very people that were enslaved on that land were your ancestors, and which is such a cool story because there was a time where your ancestors were forced to work on that land against their will, and now you guys are the owners.
Yeah. And so there's the Whitney Plantation, which we are direct descendants from. And then we own Woodland Plantation, which is still in St. John the Baptist Parish, but actually a little bit further from where we are. And we don't know that we are direct descendants of Woodland. We haven't been able to find information yet. It's highly likely that we are because enslaved people, although we will say we descend from one particular site, there was such a spread between that area of movement to where like there's a lot of different plantations we actually descend from. But the 1811 revolt was the largest, as you mentioned, largest slave revolt in the country. However, it's not well known, even for community members, even for our descendants of Woodland Plantation. The intent of that, the intent of the silence, right, was to make sure that no one knew about this event when it happened in the 1800s because of like the risk of revolts was so prevalent. If you think about the area, there was way more enslaved people than there were the people who owned them. So the threat of revolt was always very much on their minds. But for I call them freedom fighters, there was 500 people who fought for
Wow.
their freedom. They organized. It was a very strategic, sophisticated planning led by Charles DeLon, who was moving between different plantation sites in order to organize. And if you think about the Africans who came in and the Black people who were there, they were speaking different languages. So I think there were at least three different African languages being spoken
Wow.
in English and French. So that's a lot to navigate and it's a lot to organize. And I'll
Wow.
end with this, the revolt was put down after 3 days, and there were about 60 or 70 people who were executed because of their participation in that revolt. But on that day, it was 500 people who participated altogether. About 400 people had their freedom. So it was a success in many ways, although it came with the martyrdom of the those who were executed.
Yeah, and it's so cool because you guys have turned this into such a great spot of education and culture and really made it known about how important uh, that culture has been on not only the state of Louisiana, but on the United States because so many great musicians came from, descended from those families that were enslaved. And we want to obviously we're going to talk about your environmental activism, but you guys really had a lot to share just to to put in the community. Because look, you're never going to have an argument for me. A lot of this stuff got blown over and wasn't paid attention to, and this is extremely important that everyone learns the full history of the place they come from.
Yeah, and one thing that it is sometimes it may seem audacious to say this, but this country was built on Black and Indigenous knowledge, sacrifice, skill, expertise. Without it, this we would never have been, the country would never have started. It could not, or it would have failed completely. So, well, music and culture and food is definitely, you can see our influence. There's a lot of other ways that we contributed: engineering, architecture, geography, landscape, botany, biology, medicine, right? Even that's just a little bit where you can see that have deep African and indigenous roots. So even the basics of our medicine, for example, like aspirin, right, comes from a root that was found through indigenous communities. So it's just as we're peeling back the layers, we're just seeing that there's so much impact and so much influence came in from a culture that is deemed the minority. We are the minority, but so much of our culture is being and our influence is baked into the United States.
Yeah, I mean, just go to New Orleans and you see it everywhere. It really is such a huge part of one of the most culturally diverse cities in the United States, and a lot of that came from the people that came from those descendants. Now, you and your sister in the last few years have been making a lot of headlines in some environmental activism, and like before we started recording, you mentioned a lot of things that even I never thought about. That's extremely important. I'll let you explain it more. But when you talk about these communities, like obviously slavery has ended, but these companies came in and said we want to build a factory right across the river, right across the street from where people are living, where people are people like yourself have set up great businesses. And I think your sister made a great point. It may have been you. I don't know. Y'all look just alike, so I don't know which one it was. Um, but you talked about when industrialization comes, they hit people with, "Oh, we're going to pay you all this money, and you can work here." And they don't educate people on the health risk that comes from major industrialization. Now, obviously, do we need industrialization in this country? Absolutely, but it doesn't need to be across the street from where people are trying to live and have families and try to live a healthy life. And you guys have done such a great job with activism and getting awareness out about how just because somebody offers the community well-paying jobs, that's not always the best idea for the community.
Well, exactly right. And even in the marketing that they're using. So, like if we need industrialization, I would prefer that to go to something like clean energy,
Yeah.
like solar. That is something that we know that is a cleaner, but also has an impact because it is an industrial project. But also the false narratives that these companies come in and provide you good jobs. That is a lie. And 99% of the cases, the jobs that they are providing you are subsidized, which means that you are paying a company millions, sometimes hundreds of thousands of millions in Louisiana's case, to get a job that maybe pays $50 to $70,000. So that means you as a taxpayer, we're subsidizing every job, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars for a worker to only get maybe a fraction of that. So like for us is to break that model that we have that really, it ties back to capitalism. And I know, like, working in the business world, but I would much rather subsidize. We would be better off subsidizing our entrepreneurs versus us
Yeah.
going and grabbing these industries that cause a lot of pollution. And even I'm just talking about like the subsidies when we are looking at the cost of cleaning up after them, of like, yeah, just cleaning the air, the water. When they shut down, there's also infrastructure that could be material that has to be cleaned. You could be in the tunes of multiple millions, up to billions of dollars in order to maintain these sites.
Yeah, and something you mentioned, and again, I wasn't aware of this, but this goes to show why people need to see your content. Because even if a place, quote, is a clean, you got trucks coming in and out, you got people driving into every day. You mentioned the infrastructure, the road's eventually gonna give out, so you're gonna have to spend more money to fix the road that people have already paid tax money with their hard-earned money. So it really is such an important issue. And you guys have used business skills to really get the word out because you both have a business background, you both have an education background. And, something that is so important to me, and I know Miss King's on with us right now, and I know she'll agree with me on this, that one of the biggest skills a young person can learn in school right now is how to communicate, how to sell, how to get in front of people and have your idea be known. Because you guys have done such a great job of that. And these kids may have something they believe in. They may have a business idea they want to pitch to somebody. They may have a cause they want to stand for. You can't just be worried about watching a TikTok if you want yourself to be heard. So how important is it to start working on these speaking skills and these marketing and sales skills right now in high school?
Yeah, I would say at being able to advocate for yourself. And I look back, and one of the biggest regrets that I've had, because I've had environmental injustice. I've been exposed to chemical accidents and industrial like abuse since I was young and 10 years old. But I didn't start really advocating until I'm in my 40s. And I wish that I had that when I was younger, I had been more plugged in because I have the blessing to work with younger people, the younger generation, and it always brings so much to the movement. I'm always just so excited in the progressive mind. I love that our kids today are able to like break things down and ask questions because we assume so much, like we have taken a word of like we don't really investigate, we just kind of take it at face value. And I love how our students are like, oh, wait, I don't really, why do I have to work in this particular industry? Is there a better alternative? What about if I'm concerned about the planet? What kind of planet will I have when I have my kids? So I just love, I think that the voice of youth is so important to the movement right now. It really is. You are, for the youth out there. And I find even working with the older generation, there's so much more progressive mindset. And for this, for what we need progressive. We need progression. We need to progress from where we are. So not, and it doesn't progress and progressiveness does not have to align to political party. If you're hearing about that, you can be
Absolutely.
progressive in so many ways. It goes beyond being political, right? So
Absolutely.
don't like just say it's based on one particular party, idea, identity. Trust me, I have seen it span everything. So don't pigeonhole yourself by that.
I agree, and it's amazing, and I'm so glad you mentioned that because I stay completely out of politics on this platform. It's not my place, and I always say if you're asking me for political advice, you're hurting anyway because I don't have enough sense. But at the end of the day, if you really think about it, there's so much that you can agree on if you come together and try to solve a problem. And you guys have done such a great job of that, and it's just amazing to see. Now, along the same lines because that communication is so important. Um, what are some of the things that you guys have really gotten out there that maybe people aren't aware of? Because I even told you myself, it wasn't until I watched your Good Morning America piece that I even thought about some of these things.
I think for us, one of the narratives, and it's not one that we start, has actually been in the lexicon and the space for a little bit, but still so much to know about it, is a connection between the plantation system and how it impacts communities now. So yes, slavery ended in one way, but very much the system of slavery is so much around, and you for sure we see it in Louisiana, but even a lot of our federal laws are still set up around the plantation system. Some of the biggest plantation owners in this region went to, became presidents and became, working within the federal level. So you still see impact today. And understanding, like for me to human rights, because what you will see is when someone's human rights is denied, although it could be pollution, it may be a petrochemical plant, it could be a grain terminal, it could be sugarcane farming. At the heart of it is sacrificing individuals' human rights, which leads sacrifice zones, and then threatens fence line communities. And then it's like a domino effect, impact, right? It moves further and further until you are the next one in line for that damage and destruction. So like just making that, just showing the connection between it. And then also to understanding that plantation grounds are sacred spaces because the
Absolutely.
enslaved were buried on there. So they are burial sites. They need to be protected. They are only access to our ancestors, which so much have been robbed from us, right? So yeah, just really highlighting that these spaces hold the remains of our ancestors.
Yeah, and I know that you can agree with me on this too, because something that I've always said, and I was even quoted in a magazine a couple years ago by saying this, there is no doubt that even after slavery ended for decades, rural communities were left behind, especially rural black communities when it comes to resources, when it comes to access, when it comes to technology, and a lot of things are starting to change. And I have so many kids that think just because I never saw this doesn't that means I can't do it. And I know you guys speak so highly of your late grandmother and how she maybe didn't have ability to do things, but you guys have, done more than make her proud. You carried her name forever. But I always say you can be the first to do something and still be the best at it. So just because you haven't seen it in your community doesn't mean that you can't take a stand and really stand for something great, even if nobody in your family has had the opportunity.
Yes, that definitely can happen. And for those, but I take that responsibility on for us. And Black communities are still suffering from slavery. It's still, and sometimes in many cases, we still are seeing, especially like in Louisiana, where education is so depleted and the resources are so strained in our communities where they're facing lack of clean water or dealing with climate issues and unhomed because they've been had to their home has been destroyed by a storm and the recovery. So it's a lot of pressure that we put on kids to have to be the first. And I truly believe we have to help our communities more. It's so much what I want is I often hear that it's like we're strong and we're brave and we be courageous. And I fight for the right for our kids to not have to be brave, courageous, or strong. I want them to be
Wow.
themselves, right? I want them to be themselves, and we are putting too much pressure on our kids to have to be the first because they don't have the support. So we need to look at ourselves as
Wow.
a government, right? We have to look at ourselves. What are we doing to where that kid can just be a kid? So that's my thinking of it is just like we have so much more that we owe to our communities and what can we do to help?
That's incredible. That's uh, such a great way to explain it. And I do have some questions from the students, and these are fantastic. You talked about, you like seeing young people, think about the big issue. And I did not coach these questions at all. And
Mhm.
I'm amazed that they're asking. This first one is Raheem Cole. He's in ninth grade, and he asked, "What is the one non-negotiable principle that you have applied to your business, even as a nonprofit?"
Oh, thanks, Raheem. That's a great question. So the non-negotiable is I do not compromise with industry, with anyone who wants to come in and harm the community. I will sit down across the table from a person, and we've had this come in, right? I've had these people come in, and I do if they want to talk with us, I'm willing to do that, but it needs to be in a transparent way. It needs to be with the community having access to that conversation. So it's not a private kind of siloing of it, because this is the way that we've seen other businesses take advantage. So they'll divide and conquer, and they'll say one thing in one pocket and switch, and then it changes and evolves. So one thing that we do is we come to the table, we will do that, but it is a very transparent and open, so that everything we say is out in the open. Nothing is in secret.
That's awesome. I like this question. This is Albriana Towner. She's in 11th grade, and she asked, "What is the biggest obstacle that you guys faced in starting this, and how did you overcome it?"
So the biggest obstacle that we faced is from a man named Christopher James who wanted to build a grain terminal next to our community. And he owned, if you search him, you will see that he is probably a billionaire, and he wanted to put his plans here, and he didn't listen to us. So that was one big obstacle that we had, was just wanting to protect our community from the grain terminal project he was trying to put in our community, which would have caused a lot of pollution from the grain itself, from the cars coming in, from the ships, and that traffic and the fuel being used. So it was just like an inappropriate project. And that was it was an obstacle because it really slowed us down on what the mission of our organization was. But in many ways, it also fast forwarded a lot of the attention that we had. So another big obstacle was really we grew really, really fast, which you may say like, oh, well, that's how is that an obstacle? When you don't have your system and your processes in
There you
place,
go.
and you don't have your plan, and even if you do not have money, plan for success. It does not take you anything to write a plan or a system down. And when things
There you
start
go.
moving quickly, you will not have that mental capacity that you have right now. Or maybe you will, maybe you're better than me in joy, but it was really difficult. We're instituting some policies and processes right now at 5 years that should have been done within 6 months, but because it moved so fast, right, it was just hard to keep up with it.
That man, that's such a great point. We talk about that often. Man, this is a good one here. This is Zayden Mann. He's in 9th grade, and he asked, "What important lessons did you gain growing up living in South Louisiana that you would not have gained if you have grown up somewhere else?"
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I know what good gumbo is, so I don't think I would have gained
Oh
that
yeah.
without
Oh yeah.
being in South Louisiana. But I am my descendant identity because I live in a rooted community. I'm a rooted descendant, which is a term my friend coined, which means that I am rooted from the community where my ancestors were enslaved and my ancestors live. And so, difficult as that is, also I'm part of a freedom town, which was built by in part, Black Union soldiers and their wives. So I live in a free town, and that's a whole different type of like independence and village living. But like being around my roots and seeing how my family was a part of the society, how they contributed and walk in their footsteps right now, it's given me a real love for my descendant identity. So I don't think I would have been able to have that connection had I not lived. So maybe I would, but it'd been harder to have that connection without being so close to it.
Awesome. Well, I got two more. This is Shataria Hennon. She's in 10th grade, and she asked, "What is the biggest obstacle or wall you guys have hit starting this, and how did you learn from it?"
Oh, so another big wall that I think you all should understand is that you have rules, right? And you think the rules are there, and somebody breaks the rules. Somebody's gonna come and like your teacher's gonna come in and put them in detention or give them punishment. And you just like you do something wrong, you break a rule, you get punished for it, and you have to pay. That is not real life in many cases. Like so many times people will do the wrong things and there is no one there to hold them accountable. So you may have to be, such as our case, you may have to be that person who's pushing for justice and accountability. So just understand, just because a rule exists doesn't mean that everyone is going to follow it. Okay, but that's okay because you can still fight for justice. You can still fight for the right thing like for us, there were times were very frustrating when I always lived my life by trying to just follow the rules, do the right thing. That's how my parents raised me. That's my grandparents raised me. And it was really disappointing to see some people were able to get around the rules. But you should always, you follow the rules. And if there is a rule you do not like, then what can you do to correct that in a way that's safe for you, right? So how do you challenge that in a way that's right? If it's being involved in policy, if it's talking to a politician, if it's talking to your principal, and so you can have that change in a safe way. But obstacles, how many people actually break the rules and get away with it? And they make life so much harder for a lot of people.
Yeah, and before I get to this last question, I think that's a great spot to say local and state elections matter. Um, I will never tell a student who they need to vote for, but I have a huge problem when I hear somebody say, "Well, I'll just vote for the president." Well, that doesn't affect your life near as much. The people that are in office in your local communities that are there making your everyday decisions, that's the people you need to be researching and you need to be deciding who to put or put out of office. And it's so mind blowing that people don't pay more attention to that. People don't even know who their city council person is, who their county supervisor is, and they're the ones that are you have to put in place to make things better for your community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say I've gone to meet not to like for educational purpose, right? We'll go to DC and just like alert people, let them know about what's happening in our community. We are 501(c)(3), so we can't vote for anybody or endorse anybody. But what I will say is that to your point is I've gone and we've raised issues, and it's those, even being in DC, they'll say, well, what's happening at your zoning board? What's happening in your economic development commission? They'll like revert back to the closest thing to you. So those positions are even more important than I think some of these bigger elections that we pay so much more attention to.
Absolutely, and I keep telling these kids that don't just pay attention to who's in the White House. What affects your everyday life is who's in the city hall and who's in the board of supervisors. But this is the last
And
question, and
also
this
what's happening across the globe too. Look at who's in power internationally. We also work in the United Nations space, and it has impact on your community too.
that's awesome. I love this question. This is Kaylin Bullock. She's in ninth grade, and she asked, "How has this project and this business impacted you personally?"
Oh gosh. This business has totally changed my life. And what I think for me is I felt like stops and starts. And there's a lot of mistakes that I made. And what really changed is that I didn't give up. So I have failed many times, but failure is part of the process. I hope that you can do this without as much failure as I had. But also, if you do have things that fail, it's adjusting. Like you just have to continually adjust things. And I think, like for me, I have accept grittiness. So, like, just because something is, you may have to do it gritty, which means it has a little bit more dirt on it, or may not be as polished as you want. But it refines itself as long as you keep going into where you need it to be. So, really, like, accept failure, understand it's part of the process. If I had not failed and been fired and had all of these things happen to me, I would not have ended up where I am right now. And it's really, I do exactly what I want to do. I love the organization. I work with amazing people around me. I've been able to travel the world. I've been able to just know more about my history. It's been a total, adventure. And that came by really just keep fighting, and you're going to change so many times, many of you. You're going to have so many different pathways, and you may take one trip, it may not be the right path. That happens, right? But who you are on the inside and you keep going, is really what's going to make the difference. So yeah, I love what I do.
I love it. Well, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. But a couple things before we go. First of all, the descendantsproject.org is the website. All the great information on there. All your social medias are on there. I encourage everybody to follow you guys on Instagram and Facebook. Really cool updates, to see all the great programming you guys have going on, all the ways you're getting involved in the community. And like you said, you're all about getting the word out there. So I encourage everybody to go to the website. And how can they visit if they're ever in the area?
Well, you can, when we open our site next year, you can go onto our website. We'll have more information. We'll have the schedule up. Or if you would like to arrange a visitation, we also right now are hosting groups. So if you have a class who wants to come on a field trip, we'd love to have you over. So that's just, I guess, maybe more for our teachers who are out there, or if your parents can get some groups to come together. If y'all can do that, we would be happy to host you for right now.
Yeah, and we'd love to get a trip together. But the last thing before we go is, obviously you guys have faced hurdle after hurdle, even as young girls there in Louisiana. And we're a rural, all black community in Mississippi, but I've got so much intellect and so much talent and so much tenacity in this room. And I know the other teachers are feeling the same. So no matter where you come from, no matter what your background is, you can still be successful. So, what can these kids do to get ready as they start matriculating through high school and start making these decisions for their life? How can they be just as successful as you and your sister?
Well, the fact that you're from a rural black community is a gift. That is an asset. And so that is a story of success. It may not be defined in a way that we want to define things, right? And I know we struggle a lot in rural black communities, but that is a system problem. Is how the system has failed our black rural communities. And I want you all to know that, because if you feel you're lacking of something, it's not anything that you've done. It's a
There you
situation that you've
go.
put in. You've been
There
put
you
in that
go.
situation, and your starting level is successful. You're already successful. And so there's no need to have to prove that. But what I want you to do is to fight. I know it's difficult, because it's easy to, maybe when you're hungry or when your family is struggling, it's really hard to keep that in mind. But this is something that we as black people, especially in the rural, it's going to be a struggle, and that's not something that I can take away from you. But know there are people like us that are fighting along with you. We're here to help you. We're here to connect. And yeah, like you're worth it. You descend from very important people, and you are very important. And so, as descendant communities around this country, we're here to support. And yeah, just know that you're loved. You're loved by your ancestors. You're loved by your parents, and you're loved by people like us who can't even see your face, but it's a love that I hope you can feel coming from us.
Awesome. Well, give Joy my best. I hate you couldn't join us, but thank you guys so much for joining us. My friend, Joe Banner, co-executive director of the Descendants Project down in Wallace, Louisiana. We thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks so much.